Welcome to Indications and Warnings with Chuck Pfarrer, co-produced by Alan Brewer. Chuck and I are recording this show on Wednesday, October 16, 2024, day 966 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. You can find all 6 episodes of Indications and Warnings on YouTube, where we broadcast on the Information Warfare Initiative channel. Subscribe and get notifications whenever Indications and Warnings posts a new episode. Today, Chuck and I will look at a series of maps on the Zero Line, but first an overview of the current state of the war, its tempo, and some top-line news. Chuck, Timothy Milovanov, president of the Kyiv School of Economics, returned recently to Kyiv after traveling in the United States. This is what he posted yesterday about the mood he encountered. The mood is pitch black. Ukraine feels betrayed. Even as President Zelensky presents his peace plan, even as Ukraine continues its operations on Russian territory in Kursk and Belgorod, even when Ukraine can claim superiority in drone warfare, I, for one, can fully understand why the mood, at least as Milovanov encounters it back in Kyiv, is pitch black.
Well, I'm afraid he's hit it right on the head. And it doesn't make me feel good that you and I discussed exactly this sort of a culmination to the summer. And we discussed it last year around Christmas time, when Mike Johnson stepped in front of the aid train and did so for undiscernible political reasons. I have no idea why he thought or ever thought that failing to meet our obligations to the nation of Ukraine, why that was good policy. Why he thought that facilitating a Russian imperial war of aggression was in the interest of the United States or of our European allies. That move was indefensible then. It was incomprehensible then. We talked about it for months. And as we approached, now we're in the middle of October, we talked about this summer being the time of consequence. This was when the lack of arms, the lack of ammunition, the lack of equipment, we were going to see reverses on the battlefield. It doesn't make me feel good at all to say we saw the train coming in the tunnel. We saw it, and now it's happened. And the Ukrainian people feel betrayed. How could they not? How could they not feel betrayed?
One would hope that expressing this sense of betrayal would finally get through to all of the leaders of Ukraine's allies, but especially get through to President Biden, and finally compel him before he leaves office to do all the things he can do to help Ukraine win, to actually help Ukraine win.
Well, we talked about this too. And, you and I have scrupulously avoided partisan U.S. politics. That isn't what this show is about. I'm not interested in anyone's politics, and I know no one's interested in mine. But in this case, the commander-in-chief of the United States has not availed himself of all of the means by which he could mitigate some of these arms slowing. There are presidential decision directives. There are executive orders. There are half a dozen executive actions that the commander-in-chief can take in regards to a situation like this. And again, look, this isn't, I'm not bashing the person who occupies the office of the commander in chief, but I can tell you that the commander in chief spent 580 days on the beach in Rehoboth. Presidential decision directions, not one. Reversal of the National Security Council's hanky twisting, not one. Opportunity to stand up at Ramstein and do what John Kennedy has done. You want to go out and you want to be remembered as a commander-in-chief and a president of the United States. I would urge the president to do that. This could be the most vital decision he could make in this century. He could do it. Sorry.
No,
it just gets.
I feel the same way. And President Zelensky himself said Ukraine is fighting this axis, all nuclear powers, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. He didn't mention China, but of course he should have. There's no doubt that China is supplying both technological and, one can assume, lethal supply to Russia in its war against Ukraine. As a matter of fact, in the month of September, Chinese exports to Russia hit an all-time high for a single month. They're not sending electric cars to Russia, are they?
No. And, the president has framed it pretty well. They are in mortal combat with a nuclear armed power.
Mm-hmm.
And not only a nuclear armed power, one that is not very careful about the manner in which they threaten to use those weapons. We know that North Korea has to be the most irresponsible nuclear power that even could be imagined, with a caricature of a leader. I just did a piece, it'll be out probably this weekend for the Kyiv Post, discussing what is North Korean intervention in this war? What does it look like? So in 19 June, Vladimir Putin flies over to visit his little buddy, and they grip and grin, and they talk about trade and defense pacts. It's sort of not really known that 7 months previously, in November of 2023, North Korean troops were on the ground in Ukraine.
Wow.
You and I talked about this when the first North Korean ballistic missile smashed into a city. We said they didn't spend weeks hot translating the manuals from North Korean into Russia.
Right.
That didn't happen. And no Russian sat there trying to figure out the kanju and going, well, I guess this one goes here and we'll push this button. Everybody get back. That didn't happen either. You could not ignore the fact that North Korean missileers were on the ground and operational in Ukraine. Okay, we also said the same thing about the Shahed drones. When they arrived in their thousands, it was Iranian technicians who were on the ground and continue to be on the ground in Ukraine. When you think about what's in this for North Korea, we know it's in it for Putin, and that itself is emblematic of his weakness. He needs 152 millimeter artillery ammunition. And North Korea is in a position to give him 3 million rounds a year going forward. That's 50% of what he needs per year to destroy every Ukrainian habitation that he can reach from the zero line. Okay, it's interesting to me that he needed that ammunition, right? It's interesting to me that he needs those ballistic missiles. This is how deeply he has drawn into his military reserves. Ukrainian partisan groups have identified 3 North Korean training bases north of Mariupol. The North Koreans are undertaking live fire artillery exercises in this vicinity, indicating to me that they may soon be operating in a fire support role. Perhaps not yet, underscored, not yet participating directly in infantry combat, but that isn't entirely off the table.
Well, it's been variously reported, Chuck, that there are some 3,000 to 10,000 North Korean troops, as you mentioned, around Mariupol, but also apparently on the ground in Kursk. And the first reports were that, a number of North Korean troops, like a handful, abandoned their positions. I don't know if they were running for safety or if they were running for defection. It will be interesting to see how that turns out.
Right. That's somewhere between 16 and 18 North Korean troops, are absent without leave. I think, that may be indicative of how they might perform on the battlefield. There's also information that evolved just before we got on that sources are reporting that 100,000 North Korean troops are in training in the Russian Far East. So I'll let everyone draw your own conclusions. If you are training 100,000 troops, roughly 3 divisions, that implies to me that you may be preparing them for entry into infantry combat in Ukraine. Just a hypothesis now, not even, not a finding of fact by any means. But if you're dealing with that number, there might be another reason for that too. North Korean forces have not been in large-scale conflict for more than 70 years. They don't have any battle experience for large-scale maneuver operations. There have been North Korean advisors in hotspots all over the world throughout the Cold War and in the post-Cold War. They are out there. But their generals, their marshals, the guys with all the frying pans on their uniforms, they haven't commanded major maneuver elements in the field. I like the idea that 18 of these guys said, forget it, we're out of here. This may happen as well. We'll see. But it is not the time to fail Ukraine. It isn't the time.
So far, all I've heard in response to this news about North Korean assistance is from the United States. That is concern. This is an overused word, whether you hear it at a Pentagon briefing or a State Department briefing or a White House briefing. And I would suggest it is time for them to come up with a new word. Couldn't they be alarmed? And couldn't they possibly answer the alarm bells that are now ringing so loudly everywhere we look?
We talked about this as well. It certainly appears that Washington does not want to hurt Russia's feelings by shooting down the bombers that rain cruise missiles into the center of cities. 4, 5, 6 Patriot batteries would make that an unworkable proposition for the Russian Air Forces. Why aren't we giving the fundamental pillar of sovereignty for Ukraine's airspace, Patriot missiles, THAAD missile batteries? Why is it inappropriate to give them the means to defend themselves? No nation has ever going to be defeated by a Patriot battery. You don't bombard an enemy city with a THAAD battery. You protect your own cities. And you and I talk about this so much, but let's point the fingers where they go. They go to Jake Sullivan, who is overly concerned about Putin's red lines and ignores every aberration of conduct, every war crime, every gross violation of the Geneva Convention. These are not red lines to him. If 15 Ukrainian troops are stripped of their clothing and shot in the head, no, they don't even deign to comment on it. They don't mention it. It goes on every day in Ukraine. Disarmed Ukrainian combatants are executed out of hand. No word from Washington.
And it's absolutely damning that there is no word from Washington. I mean, I have to use the word ashamed. I feel ashamed when the United States cannot respond as needed. And if Jake Sullivan or President Biden himself have some fear that their aid to Ukraine would start a war with Russia, they better wake up and understand they are already in a war with Russia. And it's better for the United States and for all of Europe and for all of the NATO allies to win this first battle by helping Ukraine win this war. If the US, NATO, and Japan, South Korea, and Australia, if they don't want to fight a bigger, wider war, then get the job done and win this one.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is, let's look at it this way. This isn't my assessment. This is the assessment of UK Defense Intelligence. They state that Russia has applied 95% of its military force capacity into Ukraine. Jake Sullivan wants to intimate, imply, certainly by his conduct, he convinces me that he believes there is a threat of a wider conventional conflict somewhere. Jake, old buddy, old pal, Ukraine is the size of Texas. Russia is not conquering Ukraine. It would take them 4 centuries to get to the Polish border if you take their highest level of advancement from any one place. Russia does not have the capacity to engage NATO in a war. The Russian economy is the size of, wait for it, Italy's. There is so much that could be done. Jake, you don't want to fire a shot. I agree. You've never been in a fist fight in your life. War looks big and tough and scary to you. Pinch off Russian energy exports. Back up the sanctions. Start leaning on nations, I'm talking to you, Greece, that facilitate the transfer of ghost fleet energy exports. Stop that stuff in its tracks.
Well, it's funny how the conversation hasn't changed after 966 days, Chuck, and it's aggravating. It burns me to keep having this same conversation week in and week out. I don't know how to get their attention. I mean, but Russia certainly gets our attention. I mean, last night, overnight, Russia launched the largest drone attack of the war. And of course, against civilian targets inside Ukraine, 136 Iranian Shahed drones. And while Ukrainian air defense intercepted most and electronic warfare deflected almost all the remaining drones from their targets, this is a clear sign that Russia is increasing the tempo of its attacks on Ukraine, and in every possible way. On the zero line, which we're going to get to in a moment, engagements soared well above the weekly average. Of course, Russian casualties mounted to over 1,400 in a single day. Ukraine also continued to destroy Russian artillery. And this is one of the most remarkable achievements that Ukraine has had in 2024, destroying more than 10,000 Russian artillery emplacements. And still, Russia outfires Ukraine. Russia isn't stopping. They've had some success. What is Russia trying to achieve right now before winter sets in?
Well, they definitely want to establish a high water mark. They definitely want to take every city they possibly can. And I put that in quotes because when they do occupy an urban area, it has been thoroughly destroyed. It hasn't been captured in the way cities are captured in maneuver warfare, meaning that they are encircled, besieged, and taken essentially intact. You either force the occupiers out or you besiege them. The Ruski Mir, the great, glorious, fraternal Slav love and care of Russia, they destroy the cities. They have destroyed Bakhmut. They destroyed Severodonetsk. They have destroyed Vuhledar. They are in the process of destroying Pokrovsk, which there is basically nothing left of that place either. These are empty place names. Everywhere that they are trying to capture now, with two exceptions, have no tactical or strategic importance. They just don't. Bakhmut never had any strategic importance. It was not the gateway to anywhere. And as we said 2.5 years ago, Bakhmut was always the gateway to Chasiv Yar, which we predicted 2.5 years ago would never fall. And it hasn't fallen. That doesn't stop the Russians from throwing hundreds and thousands of people at the problem. Every day that we see a Russian casualty rate, it used to be the mean number was 600. Then it was 800 Russian casualties a day. Then the 1,000 mark became the most frequently entered in the logbook. Now it's pushing up to 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 casualties a day, placing the Russian burn rate at well over 400,000 casualties a year. They may go over 1 million casualties before this time next year. And ominously, Putin once said in an interview he was willing to lose 2 million men in Ukraine. And I believe him. And Vladimir, you're going to lose 2 million people in Ukraine. I promise you.
I believe him too. I wonder how many North Koreans he's willing to sacrifice in Ukraine.
Precisely. What his own citizens mean nothing to him. As long as he is sacrificing Asiatics and not white Russians, there are entire towns in the Russian Far East that have lost hundreds of men out of these little villages because it is locally raised troops that are being used in the majority of engagements in Ukraine. They are not units from St. Petersburg. They're not units from Moscow. They're not units from Sverdlovsk. They're not. You know, no one wants grieving mothers in Moscow, and he will make sure that that doesn't happen. The cynicism, the brutality, it's off the scales.
Is there any way that Russia can achieve a kind of frozen conflict, especially at this moment in time, the American election taking place in 20 odd days now? No matter who is elected, that means a new administration. A new president won't be sworn in until January. It takes time to get new administrations off the ground with new members of the cabinet Does Putin see an opportunity here to press Ukraine so hard that he could get to a frozen conflict and some long, drawn out peace negotiation?
Well, so many times in war, in geopolitics, and even in life, perception trumps reality, right? What you perceive is not necessarily what's really going on. In fact, as a one-time budding psychologist, cognitive psychologist will tell you perception is not, sometimes it's 50% off. What's important for Russia is to inculcate the perception that this is a frozen conflict, to convince Westerners who are not maybe thoroughly informed on the progress of the war that this isn't a conflict that Ukraine can hope to win. And one of the inputs there is, well, look what's going on the battlefield this summer. Look at the promises that the United States made and didn't deliver on, right? Where are the Hawk missile batteries? Where are the Patriot systems? Where are the THAADs? Where are the Bradleys? Where are the M2s? Where are the M777 howitzers? Let's ask Mike Johnson, right? When have we allowed Ukraine to operate under the conditions that the United States Army could operate in Ukraine? Never. Never. We haven't done that. Is it a wonder then that even this inept, wasteful, cynical, incompetent Russian military is managing to push back Ukrainian forces? Because mass, right, the number of people you have in warfare, look, that's important. It almost, you can have Davy Crockett at the Alamo, but if you've got 70,000 people surrounding it, that tells, right? Mass will eventually tell. So, you mentioned a sense of shame. I truly feel that. I truly feel that. And the United States is doing itself no favors. Our allies look at us and they see South Vietnam. We betrayed them. They see Afghanistan and we cut and run. They see the promises we made to Ukraine. They see the commitment we made negotiating Ukraine's surrender of nuclear weapons, right? One of the only nations to voluntarily disarm, and I'm not talking about a member of the USSR. I'm talking about a sovereign nation that disarmed. We guaranteed their security. Why is this happening then? Why is this happening? When we guaranteed her security, we knew against whom we would have to operate. Believe me, it wasn't Iran, it wasn't Turkey, it wasn't Denmark, it wasn't Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. It was Russia. It was Russia. Has Putin showed malintent? Ask the Chechens, ask the Jordans, ask the Georgians, ask Moldova, ask any of the countries that he has invaded. And we both know what a prostrate, defeated Ukraine would look like.
Oh, we do. That's why I don't want to see that ever.
No.
You could also ask Syrians. Russia, of course, entered the Syrian civil war on the side of Assad, and Russian jets are still active in Syria. I might add, they haven't stopped their missions. The other thing that observers of the United States see, in addition to either broken promises or promises held in abeyance, a kind of, yes, we promised we would do that and we will, just give us time, just wait. I think the other thing they see the United States doing is meddling in how allies conduct their own wars. And this is primarily on view, of course, in Ukraine. The United States has not only imposed restrictions on how Ukraine uses weapons, it refused for such a long time to deliver long-range weapons to Ukraine. And now we actually see the United States suggesting to Ukraine that it lower the age of mobilization to under 25. That's the line right now. If you're under 25 in Ukraine, you're not going to get mobilized. You can volunteer, but you're not going to get mobilized. And again, I see this as meddlesome by the United States. And Ukraine wants to preserve as much as possible its young people. Ukraine is fighting for their future. And here we have the United States saying, mobilize right down to 18, just the way we did when we fought in Vietnam. That sickened me.
Well, especially when we are telling Ukraine to mobilize in the face of this. We know we've not given you the weapon systems you need. We know you don't have air defense parity even. We know you don't have air superiority. We know you don't have artillery parity. You can't even match the volume of fire. We know you don't have adequate fire support radars. We know you don't have fuel, reserves, logistics to support large-scale ground maneuver operations. But why don't you draft younger people and throw them in to this hot garbage can we've handed you? That is sickening. And let's call it out for what it is. You know, we had an expression in the Navy, don't you know what on my shoes and tell me it's raining. Greater mobilization is not, it isn't the answer here. No. Fulfilling promises is the answer here.
Well, look, the United States.
The other thing.
Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, no, just that it's so easy to do. There's no skin off America's nose.
Well, it's needless commentary, frankly. The same kind of needless commentary that the United States has delivered to Israel. Yes, we delivered a THAAD system to Israel, but you know, what do you see on the front page of the newspapers? Israel promises not to strike Iran's nuclear and oil infrastructure. Shouldn't Iran be left wondering whether or not Israel will strike its nuclear and oil infrastructure?
But it also tells us something. The United States has deployed arguably its best air defense system to Israel. And that leaves me with the suggestion that I guess Ukrainian cities are not quite equal to Israeli cities. I guess that's the message. Mr. Sullivan, if I've drawn the wrong conclusion from that, just give us a call. We'll be happy to talk to you here.
Well, again,
you know, what is
it underscores the feeling of betrayal that Ukrainians rightfully have because Ukraine requested a THAAD system.
Alan, it is, you know, the other thing, it often gets framed, the argument is, you know, we have to be careful about giving long-range weapon systems to Ukraine. Well, I will remind Mr. Sullivan, we have not given Ukraine long-range weapon systems. That's never been on the table. And by that, I mean, a long-range weapon system hits a target 1,000 miles in Russia, right? Ukraine does that on its own. It doesn't do that with U.S. weapons. It does it with indigenously produced Ukrainian drones. The ATACMS system is classified as artillery, not a strategic weapon, not an intermediate range ballistic missile, artillery, an artillery rocket. And by the way, Mr. Sullivan, I can't remember if you served or went to the War College, But I do know this. The United States Army could not fight without ATACMS systems. They are the weapon system that breaks up concentrations of troops, command and control nodes, and important logistics, and prevents the bad guys from getting to the zero line. Wow. Ask the U.S. Army if they want to give up all of their ATACMS because they are what? Irrelevant? No. Too brutal on the enemy? No. Might start a nuclear war by hitting a... No. It's a tool of maneuver warfare. It's not a long-range weapon system. Again, we want to help you win the information battle in your microcosm of information. These are the truths to speak to the naysayers. I'm sorry we say the same thing all the time, but the same problem exists all the time, doesn't it?
It does exist, but as the longer it goes that this problem is not solved, the greater and greater difficulty Ukraine will have in fighting off the Russians. And I certainly agree with you, Chuck. Russia can't win, shouldn't be allowed to win, but there is a way for Ukraine to lose, and that is actually underscored with the word betrayal, because that is what it would be. An abandonment of Ukraine by the United States would be a betrayal that would go down in infamy.
Infamy is the right word. And if anyone misses the parallels between the first couple of decades in the 20th century and the first couple of decades here in the 21st century, if anyone misses the correlation, the echoes of the Spanish Civil War with the inflection of weapons and tactics on ground maneuver warfare in the adversaries, right? The fascists against a more democratic forces. If anyone doesn't recognize, I almost hate this term, although it's absolutely spot on. But when people hear axis of evil, they do their eye roll, right? Folks, Moscow, Pyongyang, Tehran, and Beijing, they are not the friends of humanity. They are not. If you want to live under this kind of dictatorship where a comic who told a joke in a nightclub in Georgia is put into the Lubyanka, then Putin's your guy. Putin's your guy. If that's what you think is freedom, yeah.
Or maybe you're the father of a young girl in Russia who drew a peace picture in her public schoolroom. Her teacher reported her. Her father was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 2 years in Russian prison. She became an orphan, went to an orphanage for part of that time. That man was just released after 2 years in prison, and only now is his experience in Russian prison coming to light because he's talking about it. But he was held in solitary confinement. He was held in what he describes as a torture chamber. He was mistreated, maltreated, and of course, malnourished. And, this is part of Putin's clamping down on Russian society and brainwashing Russian society in a way that has not been done since Stalin did it in the 1930s.
So let me just recapitulate that. A man was sent to prison, beaten, tortured, and starved because of a piece of refrigerator art that his little girl drew in school.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty easy to pick a side here. It really is. Ukraine didn't start this war. Ukraine didn't invade Russia. Ukraine did everything it could to head off this war, including shrugging off some of the most outrageous gerrymandering, hybrid war, covert invasions, and outright seizure of its own territory. It did not provoke this war. But we have a Washington that somehow thinks that an expansionist, victorious Russia is a desirable end, that that's okay. That Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they're going to be just fine if Ukraine goes under. It is insane. Russia already occupied Ukraine once in the last century, and it produced one of the most abysmal famines in human history, deliberately. Right up there with Mao's Great Leap Forward, a human catastrophe unknown in history. Forget about it. This isn't the Soviet Union anymore. Wake up. Wake up. Putin started 3 wars since he's been in power. 3 of them.
And he's not finished.
Alan, he's not finished.
Unless we see to it. Now, I know viewers primarily agree with us, Chuck, but I'm eager to see some of the comments about this show, because we have strayed a little into American politics and culture, I guess. I think maybe we've both said some things that 100% popular.
No, and I know that. And we should stay away from American politics. Folks, my 10 ring is the National Security Council. That's where my fire is going. Okay. Jake Sullivan and the things that he advises the president are wholly misapprehensions of this circumstance. So that's where I'm going.
I might get to politics before this show ends, or I might get to politics before the month of October ends, would be a better way to put it, because I know that viewers are here to get to maps. Maps on the zero line are incredibly important. Chuck's analysis of these maps really helps each and every one of us understand where Ukraine is succeeding, how, and what they are up against. Also helps us understand where the hotspots on the zero line are, where Ukraine has dug in, is clearly on the defensive, and it helps us understand, as Chuck mentioned earlier in the show, how Russians use mass to grind forward. It's called a meat grinder. That's the Russian tactic. I've seen it described as primitive, and it is indeed primitive. It's inhuman. It's brutal. And yet in some places on the zero line, it succeeds. But it's not succeeding in Kursk, Chuck. And that's going to be the first map we take a look at.
Yeah, we've got, I'm going to have to take 1 second and get that up.
Me too.
Right. Well, good. This is live. It's live here. Oh, I just pushed the wrong button. But now I've got the right button up here. So there have been a number of Russian counterattacks, principally against the westernmost portions of the Ukrainian salient. So you are looking at the map right now, but should you be listening to this and not watching it, the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk basically is a north-south kind of blob. It goes about 40 kilometers north. They still occupy just about 1,000 square kilometers, give or take, with an extremely permeable forward edge of the battle area. There are numerous Ukrainian special operations forces prowling around well north, south, east, and west of the lines of contact shown on here. In each case, this means that Ukrainian special operations forces are operating in the Russian rear against Russian ground lines of communication and supply, and they are exquisitely picking off lucrative Russian targets like 30 vehicle convoys, like command and control nodes, like ammunition, petroleum, oil, and lubricant storage points, etc. So we're looking at this map, 14 October. You can see the Russian incursion from the west. This is the second time that Russia has pushed this deep. Their first incursion, they were driven out. They had actually attacked into an area that was bordered on the north, on the south, and on the east by water courses. So they attacked into a cul-de-sac that they never really could have gotten out. They were pushed back. They've now pushed into this. And if you're looking at the map, you can see this sort of thing looks like a snapping turtle with its mouth open. Anytime you get a situation like that, you have to worry about the mouth pushing closed. And it's a little hard to see on this map, but in a larger scale map, the mouth is open, but there's a little pocket where the Russians are even pushed farther, almost like the gullet. And that will be the first thing that closes. And when that does, we'll likely see the zero line will go back and forth as it had previously. There are approximately somewhere between 40 and 50,000 Russian troops in the Kursk Oblast. They are not commanded by general officers who are capable of waging ground maneuver warfare at the divisional levels. They don't have anyone that can do that. They fight mostly at the company and sometimes, rarely, at the battalion level. You and I have talked about this for the last 900 days, Alan. You can't win a war fighting at the company level. That's not how you invade and capture Germany. It's not how you liberate France. It's not done on the company level. It's done by general officers who can command divisions and army groups. And there isn't a single sycophantic, kleptocratic brass hat working for the Kremlin that can do this.
Well, they don't have the best of all troops in Kursk either, even though they have redeployed Russian troops apparently from Donetsk and Luhansk. It's also been reported that there have been hundreds of conscripts fighting in Kursk, and dozens, if not hundreds, surrendering to Ukraine. And what has Ukraine found? 18-year-olds without training and with obviously ill-equipped as well. It's and again, this goes to the reason why Putin is looking to North Korea for manpower. And some of it is in Kursk already.
Yes, there are North Korean troops in Kursk right now. This may, people might not believe this, but I don't actually want to see 18-year-old Russian boys getting killed. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see lambs being led to slaughter. So it is not just that the officers commanding these boys are inept. They are inept. They are brutal. They are uncaring. Casualties never factor as a determinant in a Russian battle plan. It's utterly irrelevant how many men you lose. But exacerbating this vacuum at the top is that these 18-year-old children have not been trained as soldiers. They don't know land navigation. They don't know how to use their weapons. They have no idea or electronic connection to higher headquarters. They are not capable of carrying out complex military evolutions or even maneuvers on the battlefield. They don't know how to shoot, move, or communicate. You're not a soldier unless you can do those three things. And it isn't easy. It takes months and months to master land navigation. It takes months to learn a weapon system. Even as an infantry soldier, infantry school is 6 months long. That's after basic training. You want to be a paratrooper? That's another month. You want to be a ranger? There's another 6 months. So the cynicism of the Russian leaders here is evident. And again, Putin is pushing it a bit because he's not supposed to be sending conscripts into the special military operation, but this is Kursk. So get out of jail free? I don't know.
Yeah, right. He's fighting to recover Russian territory that Ukraine has successfully taken and will probably hold for the coming weeks. And certainly, if it succeeds in keeping a hold of what it has in Kursk until, let's say, December 1st, it will surely be there on May 1st, don't you think?
I absolutely do. Because this back and forth on the zero line, it's not the main show. The main show are detachments of Ukrainian combat engineers creating defensive lines, building on the Servov line, building winter quarters for Ukrainian troops. In the blue areas here, they are laying mines. They are delivering tank traps and dragon's teeth. There are variants of the Baba Yaga drone that can actually pick up an anti-armor barrier, a reinforced cement pyramid. This thing can pick it up and fly away with it. It's going to take, at the Russian burn rate, right? This is going to take tens of thousands of Russian lives to take back Kursk. Tens of thousands. That might deter a Western general to look in the face of that casualty level. But Alan, a Russian general, look, those casualties to him, they might as well be pencil erasers. 0 Fs are given. None about how many people they lose. For a Western trained officer, your people are your most important resource. They are the thing the government trusted you with, right? Totally different ethos, completely different planets.
It's quite possible some of the Russian citizens in Kursk don't want to be liberated. They might well be happier, and I know they would be better off as citizens of a free Ukraine.
They absolutely would. What is amazing here in Kursk, Russia is saying that Russian citizens have disappeared in Kursk. That's pretty rich from a nation that has kidnapped more than 100,000, much more than 100,000 Ukrainian children and spread them through orphanages in the Russian Arctic and in Siberia. That is a bit rich, isn't it? But nothing has changed. When I was a boy, it was the Soviet Union saying these kinds of things. The leopard doesn't change its spots.
No, it doesn't. It's interesting. As we go through this show, Chuck, day 966. It's not so different than the show we did on day 866, or the show we did on 766 or 666. You can
I
go back,
remember. Yeah.
go back, just jump backwards in time 100 days, 100 days, 100 days. And we are essentially talking about the very same thing. But what is interesting, we weren't talking about incursions into Russia, not only in Kursk, but now if we look at the Kharkiv map, there's, of course, a lot more happening in Kharkiv than just going across the border into Belgorod Oblast, but that has occurred.
Right. There are, and I'm sure everyone is looking at the map right now. Your eye will be drawn, of course, to Kharkiv, which has again been the target of Russian glide bombs. And I'm sorry that I have to reiterate that these weapons are being targeted on apartment blocks. That is their aim point. When they leave the pylon of those Russian strike aircraft, that's what the bomb's flying for. That's what they aim for. More than 90% of Russia's precision strike munitions deliberately target civilian dwellings. Okay, so you can go up that series of 4 airstrikes, and Ukraine has come across the border to the west of Heliboke, 2 places where Russia has come across the border, the Vovchansk axis, which is over to the right, and Heliboke, which is just north of Kharkiv. Ukraine has established another cross-border lodgment there at Zhuravlyovka. This lodgment is only about 2 kilometers square. When you are dealing with military maps, they are broken up into 1 kilometer squares. You may have heard them referred to as a grid square. Sometimes they're referred to as a kill box. If you have adequately prepared your artillery, air, etc., you want them to come into that kill box and let them have it. Ukraine is doing this to divert Russian resources away from these other 2 lodgements. I think we may see more incursions like this, even if they occupy 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers. It will be a significant diversion for Russian resources. So these are sort of provocative attacks. They're opportunistic attacks. And, you're looking at an OSINT map. I get a couple of direct sources from the battlefield. They underscore, I'm very conservative in what I post here, but it's going to be in the interest of Ukraine, and it is going to be best practices and best application of resources, in my opinion, to stage more cross-border operations, take more territory. But it's very important that Ukraine do that by addressing the softest targets possible. Go where the enemy is not, go where he's not prepared to respond, and pick a place that is going to be even harder for him to reinforce, resupply, or even engage you. Because every millimeter you hold of Russia, face it, it's a bargaining chip.
Well, one would expect that the Russians are much more numerous in Belgorod Oblast than in Kursk Oblast. After all, they just launched what they called a Kharkiv offensive. They destroyed the town of Vovchansk, which we talked about earlier this week. Belgorod is also a hub of military supply, the home of Russian missiles that are fired against Kharkiv every day. So I'm surprised in a way that even though, this pinprick of a crossing that Ukraine chose to do it on the border between Kharkiv and Belgorod.
Well, one of the reasons you could say that this was chosen, you can see the M20 highway goes from the frontier into Kharkiv. When you cross the Russian frontier, it is rebranded the M2 highway. This is the principal. This was the easiest ground line of advance into Kharkiv. So by coming across the border and seizing this road, you've upped the ante. But I can assure our Russian listening guests, if you are planning to get to Kharkiv taking the M20, I would just bring a lot of spare tires if I were you. I'll just leave it at that.
You might want more than just one car in your caravan too.
You're right. Come to think of it, you might need another couple of vehicles. But anything you can do to disperse your enemy is generally what you want to do. The only time you want to facilitate the concentration of your enemy is when you can be assured that you have the means to destroy them in that position. So it isn't an ironclad rule that you want to disperse your enemy, but if you are concentrating your enemy, you need to be prepared to deal with that. And as a rule from small unit tactics, you don't want to fight the enemy's war, right? You don't want to fight in his locations of his choice. You don't want to fight in the means and utilizing the tactics that he wants to use or he's good at. You want to strike him where he's not, where he's badly prepared, and you want to hit him in a way that is difficult for him to respond to. And this is and will forevermore be an asymmetrical struggle. We still haven't seen in this war corps on corps, division on division, battalion on battalion, conventional maneuver warfare. Again, Washington, D.C., Ukraine is not prepared to fight that way because they cannot trust their supplies. They cannot, should not, and must not engage in that kind of a war because they cannot count on the fuel they need, the ammunition they need, the replacement vehicles they need, the combined arms they need. They can't count on it. Why is the war going, quote, so badly for Ukraine? Well, there's a couple of reasons right there.
Yeah.
Put the U.S. Army in Ukraine under these conditions and they'd be losing the war.
There's no question about it. I'm sure that a lot of observers of the Zero Line are going to be looking at what is happening right now in Kupiansk. That will be the next map we take a look at. What's alarming about Kupiansk is that evacuations have been ordered now, not only of the remaining residents in Kupiansk, but from villages all around Kupiansk. As we know, Chuck, evacuations always indicate a very tough battle is going on or is about to go on. And I think that's what we would say about Kupiansk. In other cases, evacuations usually are the prelude to Ukrainian withdrawal, but I don't think you're going to see that in Kupiansk at this point in time.
Yeah, I don't think that either, but the indication and warning that normally predicates a Ukrainian declaration for civilian evacuation is a massing of Russian troops. So I don't know this, but I can tell you, look, it's easily deduced. You could take this one to the bank. This check is not going to bounce. Ukraine has detected an influx of Russian personnel and vehicles. I reported last week on a Russian attempt, a battalion-sized attempt to reach the Oskil River south of Kupiansk. This was one of the largest Russian attacks in this area since the beginning of the war. This battalion-sized Russian effort came to grief and was annihilated in 2 combats that took 20 minutes from start to finish. 20 minutes, about 1,000 Russian casualties, 40 tanks lost, and 60 armored vehicles. That's what I talk about, the kill box, right? Now, Russia would like to get the river that goes down through Kupiansk and south is the Oskil River. Now, Russia is going to be driving for Kupiansk. It's an interesting city in that it exists on the west and the east side of the river. On the east side of the river, there is a band of forest between the Russians and the zero line and the city itself. If this goes to plan, Russia will try to achieve a lodgment in the forest, a small lodgment, and they will keep feeding people into it. Now, I'm not sure the battle is going to go this way, but this is how they traditionally go. They will then, as losses mount, they will try to achieve a lodgment, in this case, in Kupiansk, eastern sections of Kupiansk. Now, the Oskil River divides those 2 sections of the city, and on the western side, there is a bluff. The hillside goes up, and there is a city built on the slope rising and on the top of the bluff. If they actually get to Kupiansk, the western section of Kupiansk will be the functional equivalent of Chasiv Yar. They won't get farther than the river. We'll see. Now, they are not near the river right now. They are being held in Petropavlivka. They are being held in Shlushkivka to the south, where they came to their latest battalion-sized defeat. But they have announced a civilian evacuation, so I think we're going to see major and continuing combat here imminently.
And one of the reasons they announced that evacuation is because there is no gas, electricity, or water any longer available in the city of Kupiansk. So it's next to impossible for an ordinary civilian to continue life. It had dwindled to fewer than 3,000 people, I believe. I often wonder what compels someone to stay in their home when their home is engulfed in a war zone. I've never understood that.
Well, it's the same predilection that makes someone decide they're not going to leave their home in a Category 5 hurricane.
Okay.
It's the same thing. And I've seen it all over the world. And unfortunately, it's always the most vulnerable members of society who cling to their dwellings and cling to what precious little they have. And sometimes it is undue optimism. Sometimes it is overdone fatalism. Sometimes it is just human inertia, fear of the unknown. I've seen it all over the world. And like I said, it's little old ladies. It's grandfathers. And they've lived here all their life. They raised their kids there. They work there. That place is their life. And it's poignant, and but it's a fundamental human propensity to want that. You know, I've been through a couple of major hurricanes in my life, unfortunately. And in 2 of them, we lost everything. Everything we had, we lost. And it taught me a really important lesson, that stuff is nothing. You know, If you have to leave your house right now, grab your pictures. That's it. Everything else is just stuff. But some people, they can't do it. I'm not saying it's a weakness. I completely understand where they're coming from. But you have to imagine what it's like in that city, getting destroyed by Russian ballistic missiles, glide bombs. It's horrendous. That's what they cling to. They shouldn't. No people should have to go through this. None at all. This is Russia's war. That's the way they wage it.
If we think of Kupiansk as an example of choosing a place to fight, is Russia free right now to choose where they want to go on the zero line? Is Russia free to increase the tempo of attacks almost anywhere on the zero line? But of course, especially here in Kupiansk.
I think that, I am constantly talking down Russia's military leadership. I've been trained all my life to never underestimate the enemy. But I look with both eyes open at what they do again and again and again. I look at their combat effectiveness. I look at places where an entire division has been fought to a standstill by 400 Ukrainians. I have to look at that. I don't think that Russian military command, because they are not talented officers, they're crooks. They don't have the bandwidth to conduct large-scale maneuver warfare in more than one place. Do they have the resources? Yes. Yeah, they do. Do they have the leadership? No. Are their soldiers trained sufficiently to carry out those maneuvers? No. So that's the, that is the limiting factor here. However, man, mass is a very important factor in warfare. And if you show up every day with more guys than the other guy, you're going to get ahead.
We're going to keep our eye on Kupiansk. I'm sure over the next couple of days, we will report once again on the evacuations from Kupiansk and see if a large scale battle is going to ensue here in Kupiansk. We've been actually waiting, Chuck. If we go to the next map, if we go to Kremmina, we've been waiting for such a long time for a major engagement to take place down in Kremmina, where Russia has maintained a superiority of certainly 10-1, quite possibly even more than that. And yet it is in Kremmina that Russia has achieved next to nothing consistently. As we were getting ready for the show, I mentioned that I was going through the Kremmina maps as far back as almost 2 years ago. The zero line is almost precisely where it was during that time. It has not changed. Russian forces are operating with 10-1 superiority in this area. Presumably, they could bring 10-1 superiority at the point of attack, but they still haven't gotten to the Oskil River. Why is that? Well, if we talk about incompetent commanders commanding untrained troops who have been led company by company, served up defeat day after day, attacking the same objectives on the same axes of attack at the same time of day, and being defeated again and again and again and again. And in this case, being defeated for about 800 days in a row. Eventually, your guys are not going to be putting 100% into the attack.
and we've seen it. So in terms of combat effectiveness, with 10-1 odds at the point of attack, and you can't get, let me check the scale here, you can't get 4 kilometers. You can't get 4 kilometers to the Oskil River. And then to our Russian listening guests, what are you going to do when you get to the river? You're going to have to bring up crossing materials, engineering forces, pontoon bridges, and then you're going to get those guys killed too. It's astounding. It's astounding, Alan. We've been reporting on Kremmina
for, again, 600 days, I guess, at least. But Kremmina, I think one of the best examples of what you so often say, Chuck. It's one thing to advance. It is another thing to hold the goal you have reached. And, you know, as I say, on this map in Kremmina, it's a perfect example of Russia's inability to hold on to what they might advance to. And the topography of the map it tells you everything about why in Kremmina it would be most difficult for the Russians to hold on to any territory it succeeds in taking.
Right. And in this case, the Oskil River, to the western shores of it, there are largely a series of bluffs to the north. There is a reservoir to the south, which is just wide enough for the Ukrainians to shoot across effectively at the Russians. But the Russians, even though they keep pushing to get there, if they ever get there, they're going to be like the dog chasing the bus who catches it. What are you going to do now? So, you know, there's a really ironclad rule of warfare. If there is a piece of terrain that is hard to operate against, a hilltop, a band of forest, even a swamp, the first person to get there has an incredible advantage. Even in the swamp, Americans need only to remember Francis Marion, the swamp fox. You get there first and you are hard to pull out. Look at the Viet Cong in the Rugsat Special Zone in the Mekong Delta. Hard to get out. So this is Ukraine using terrain as a force multiplier. And frankly, it's the ineptitude of the Russian commanders, right? Instead of sacrificing your battalion one platoon at a time, you could have all of your companies operating in concert, converging on an objective. And people have said to me, Chuck, quit telling the Russians what to do. I learned this as a 16-year-old cadet. If you don't know this, you don't know anything. If you're carrying out assaults like, you know, Alan, we say this, if I had planned an attack like this, it never would have gotten out of the brief back. I would have briefed this to my superiors and they would have said, put it down, put your coffee cup down, get out of the office. But the Russians push ahead with.
Yeah, possibly get out of my sight and keep going.
Keep going. But again, it's not, you know, what is the most, I was brought up, what is the most important asset, attribute, resource you have? It's the men and women under your command. That is it. And unfortunately, mission comes before men, right? Mission comes before men. You're not risk adverse. You're going to have to go in there. This is a war. People are going to get hurt. But all Western military officers are trained with, that is the most important thing your nation entrusted you with. That was it. That was it. So you use it appropriately and you win the fight. These guys are nothing.
Chuck, I think we're going to be back this week with more maps. And we may well revisit some of the maps if they change in the course of the week, although in some cases, I don't expect that to happen. But yes, we did begin the show, at least I did, on a rather dark note, talking about the mood in Kyiv, pitch black, about the feeling that many Ukrainians have of being betrayed by the United States and other allies around the world. But the first 10 months of 2024 have been remarkable in some ways for Ukraine. CNN released these statistics, within the last couple of days, and I know you've seen it, but in 2024, this is to date, so through October, Ukraine launched over 7,000 strikes into Russian territory. And we've talked about many of those strikes right here, but I want to remind viewers that, and President Zelensky reminds the world constantly, in 1 week, Russia launched 900 guide bombs, 40 plus missiles, and 400 drones against Ukrainian civilian targets. That's, more than 5 times what Ukraine can launch against Russia inside of Russia. And it's important, I think, to constantly bring this imbalance to the attention of our viewers. It is an imbalance that only the United States and the NATO allies can bring back into some kind of balance for Ukraine. And if it's not brought back into balance for Ukraine, then you are introducing the possibility of Ukraine losing this war, not in being militarily defeated, but in being diplomatically pinned to the ground. I guess, it could become a 15-round split decision, the very last thing you want to see for Ukraine, when, frankly, they have done everything possible to score the knockout, and they could do it if we would only goddamn help them.
Yeah, the other thing is this. People talk about peace negotiations. Let's frame them in what happened. Russia invaded Ukraine using hybrid warfare to start with. It unilaterally annexed Ukrainian territory, unlawfully built bridges across the Kerch Strait, occupied their nuclear power plants, have destroyed every Ukrainian city that they possibly could, have done as much damage to every city they possibly could, and now we're going to enter into negotiations. Where do we start? Why don't we start with the status quo antebellum? Why don't we start the day before the hybrid war began? And how about the day before 400,000 Russians poured over the border? You want to predicate peace talks? It is absolutely astounding to me. Absolutely astounding. We're literally talking, what are you going to do? You got the state of Texas, and these guys came all the way to Dallas. What's to negotiate about? Get out, go home, go back where you started from. You know what? We don't want to be part of Russia. We don't want to function as your vassal and your satellite. We don't want to be starved to death by you. We don't want our natural resources expropriated by you and your yacht driving oligarch buddies. We have turned our face to the West. You are in the past. You are history. Leave us alone. That would be my opening speech. And then I would argue for 26 weeks about the shape of the negotiating table, just like the Vietnamese did in Paris.
Well, I think it should be in the shape of, God, I don't know.
A U.
A U. Yeah, exactly. That would serve Ukraine quite well. Should never be in the shape of a Z.
No, never.
Well, Chuck, this is going to bring day 966 to a close for us. I want to remind viewers to subscribe to the Information Warfare Initiative, where you can find all the episodes so far of indications and warnings, and you will find every future episode. Chuck and I will be back this week with more maps, more in detail, and we are still looking for a way to get live viewers in here to ask us questions that they have on their minds as they look at the maps, Chuck. And I think we'll find a way pretty soon. We've been talking to tech folks in the background. I happen to be all thumbs when it comes to tech, but even I can push buttons, right?
Yeah, we're working on that, folks. It's, that's the thing that Alan and I enjoy doing the most. We feel that does the most good in getting the information out. So we definitely want to be fielding those questions, and we're working toward that end. But thank you, Alan, for another terrific show.
Thank you, Chuck. And the other thing I was just going to say, and this is an opportunity for you to summarize, viewers especially can use information that you have or that I report, usually secondarily. I haven't uncovered a story in about 50 years, but the information we deliver here is for the benefit of our viewers in order to confront and diffuse Russian disinformation that might come their way at work, in a family gathering, in a social gathering, even at a church service. We deliver that kind of information every day. A lot of it right here today, Chuck.
Well, that's what we want to do. We want to help you in your own information war in that microclimate. We want you to, if you choose to, you don't have to let one of these wrong-headed remarks pass. We're trying to put out the information. There are, we want reality to trump perception, right? We want to get through this Russian disinformation. We want to get through the various other types of disinformation that come to the fore here. One of the principal things is, look, the success of Russia is not going to bring security to Europe. It is not going to bring benefit to Eastern Europe. It is not going to make better the security of the Baltic states. This is a ravenous beast, and it is led by the last unredeemed Soviet apparatchik, the last man standing, the last Soviet warlord. This is him, and this is what he's doing. And you judge him by his fruits. Look at what he's done to Chechnya, to Georgia, now to Ukraine, to Moldova. Look what he's done. These are his plans. Ukraine is Europe. These are his plans for Europe. You can see them in Ukraine.
We can, and we're going to keep looking at them and being sure everybody else can see what Putin has in mind for Europe, what China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have in mind for the world order that has benefited me in my life. I think you in your life, Chuck. more than 75 years old at this point, but it's kept me safe. It has allowed me time to be free and given me the good fortune to have some share of a little prosperity. And that has brought me and my family a lot of peace of mind. And that is all Ukraine is asking for. So here
Absolutely.
on day 966, we'll be back this week. Thank you again, Chuck, and let me say, Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava. And we'll see you again, folks, on Indications and Warnings. See you this week.
Bye, Chuck.